I've wanted to tell this story for a little while, but now that I no longer live in the same city, I feel more comfortable sharing. My roommate, 24 male, and I, 24 female, lived in a duplex house less than a block away from the university in town, so our street was always very busy with cars or people walking to campus day and night. The town is pretty small, but the side of town that our house and the college are on is considered the bad part of town. I think it's because it's older, and there is low-income housing on this side of town, but the crime rate in the city overall is very low. There were a few homeless people here and there, but I got to know most of them when I worked fast food, so I was familiar with the people that were considered shady around town. Until this situation, I had never had any issues with safety in the 6 years I lived there, and I regularly walked to work and school as I didn't have a car, and I have extreme driving anxiety. About 9 to 10 months ago, I was in my living room around 10 p.m. watching TV, and my roommate was in his bedroom playing video games. I had ordered a pizza a little earlier in the evening, but some of my order was left at the store, so I called the pizza place to ask about it, and they told me someone was coming to bring the rest of it. While I'm sitting in the living room, someone knocks on my door very loudly. It startled me, but I had assumed it was the pizza man because I was expecting them anyway, so I answered the door. I want to clarify that there was no peephole on our door, nor could you see who was on the porch from the window in the living room, so the only option was to answer the door. When I opened it, there was a middle-aged man I had never seen before, standing on my porch in a large puffy jacket, a black beanie, and big, heavy boots. I can't remember his face too well because it was really dark, and I was so shocked and confused. I said, "Hello?" And he took a small step back and said,
"Hey, is your husband home?"
I didn't really think about my response because I was so confused about what was happening, so I said no. Then he said,
"Oh, well, can you come outside and help me with something real quick?"
This immediately told me to get out of the situation, so I told him to hold on, closed and locked the door, and went to get my roommate. I explained what happened to my roommate, and he went outside to see what was going on. The man had fully vanished. It had been less than 5 minutes since I had closed the door and got him, so the man must have either run away or gotten into the car with someone and driven away. I felt like a crazy person because I was the only one who had seen him, and my roommate had just told me not to answer the door that late unless I knew who it was. I was really shaken up after this incident, so I called my boyfriend crying to tell him what had happened, and he came over to make sure I was all right. Things were normal after that, but I was still very cautious at nighttime because I didn't want this to happen again. Flash forward to about mid-February. It was about 8 p.m. I had been sitting in my living room watching TV, probably waiting on food delivery again, but I can't recall, when someone knocks on my door very loudly. Once again, I'm startled, but I go answer it. When I open the door, I'm almost certain that it's the same man from the last time, wearing the same clothes. He starts to ask me again if my husband is home, and I immediately slam the door in his face, lock it, and get my roommate again. Once again, the man is gone by the time my roommate gets outside. I'm absolutely terrified at this point. For it to happen once seemed like a fluke, just a weirdo at my door. But twice? My roommate and I go back and forth about calling the police, and finally, I decided to do it. I called the non-emergency line, filed a report, and a cop came to my house, took the description, and said that they'd keep an eye out for him. She asked me if I noticed anything specific about him, like if he had weapons or if there was another car out on the road, but I didn't see any of that. I left a note in my duplex neighbor's mailbox to tell them about it because I knew there was a girl around my age that lived there, and I wanted to make sure she was aware for her own safety. But she told me that he had never come by her house, and never seen him. Nothing like that ever happened again prior to my moving out, but it stuck with me for a long time, and honestly still makes me wary to this day. Now, I'm very cautious when I leave my house, even in the daytime. It made me feel paranoid that I was being followed or targeted for trafficking or something. Thankfully, I now live in a completely different city with my now fiancé, and I feel a lot safer. Around 2007, I was getting my PhD at the University of Florida. I, 30-ish female, lived in Gainesville in a condo that I owned by myself. I had a friend who was walking across the United States. We'll call him Captain. Captain decided to spend the winter at my house, so we got a mutual friend to drive him from Alabama, where he had last stopped walking, to my house in Gainesville. We had a pleasant Thanksgiving, and then Captain just kind of chilled at my house for the next several months. It wasn't too big of a deal because I was mostly staying at my boyfriend's house, but it was a little bit much. When it was time for him to get back to walking, he asked if I would drive him back to the exact location he had left in Alabama. Looking forward to having my house back, I agreed to drive him one day when I was out of school. I don't remember what route we took or where it was, but I remember that the drive wasn't that long, relatively speaking. It seems like it should have been, but I guess it was about 5 to 6 hours one way. I dropped him off in the early evening and headed back for Florida. This meant that I was driving at night by myself in an unknown part of the country. Conveniently, the GPS technology that we had at the time gave me this extremely backwards route back to Florida. To get to where I had dropped off Captain, we stayed on the freeway for most of the time, and then it was about 10 miles off the freeway. Well, Google Maps, or whatever the app was, decided that the faster way was to take me on all of these little back roads through Alabama backcountry. Serious Deliverance vibes. Seriously. So I'm already a little freaked out, and occasionally checking in with my boyfriend to let him know where I am. I've driven at night alone tons, but my history with respect to strangers has made me hyper-vigilant. At some point, I became aware that there was a car behind me. I didn't assume that it was anything weird until the car stayed with me for several miles. Again, I had just shoved it off to maybe Google Maps giving them the same weird route. But because I was paying attention to the car behind me, I didn't notice when I pulled through some small town that I was taking a left at the wrong intersection. There were 2 intersections very close together, and I was accidentally in the left lane to turn left, and I was accidentally in the left lane to turn left at the intersection before the one I was supposed to turn at. No biggie, I figured. It's like 2 in the morning. So when the light changed, I drove straight through the intersection and took a left at the next intersection. The car behind me did the same thing. I realized at that point that I was definitely being followed. I immediately called my boyfriend and asked him to look up the non-emergency police number for the area where I was. I tried to give him my nearest location, but like any dude who has never been the victim of any kind of assault, he thought I was overreacting. He was in the middle of something and therefore didn't look up the number for me. In retrospect, I should have absolutely just called 911, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of something that could have been nothing. But that nothing was quickly becoming something indeed, because I had been on back roads in Alabama without a gas station for a long time, and my car was in need of gas. That meant that I would have to exit the vehicle at a gas station that was probably not well manned at this time of night by myself. I was low-key freaking out. It didn't help that I couldn't see the driver of the car behind me. It was dark, and the car had dark tinted windows. Also, Alabama backwood roads are pretty damn dark. I kept looking in the rear mirror, but I couldn't get a glimpse of the driver. I honestly could not figure out why this person targeted me, and at first had laughed it off as some kind of Southern football vendetta. I had a UF license plate frame, Go Gators, and was trying to convince myself that the person was just trying to scare me because they liked one of our rival schools. Given that I'm a tall woman, it may have been difficult to identify that I was a woman in the car. But either way, this person was clearly following me, and given that I had to stop my car, I was feeling increasingly at risk. Finally, my backwards woods route took me into a relatively larger metropolitan area. I was finally on streets with streetlights and businesses were still lit up. I started to feel safer, but I still had to stop for gas. I had already made a plan as far as that was concerned, but I wanted the guy behind me to know that I was on to him. So at the first intersection that was well lit, I turned fully around in my car seat and stared at him while pretending to talk on the phone. I did this for the entire time the light was red. I wanted it to look like I was describing his car and his features to whoever was on the phone. Not long after this, I found a gas station that was well lit up. I was driving on fumes and praying that I wouldn't run out of gas in backwoods Alabama. I pulled into the gas station so that my driver's side door was adjacent to the door of the gas station, jumped out, and ran inside. I let the attendant know that I was being followed, and he walked out from behind the counter and walked to the windows and said that no one was there. I was sure that the car had been behind me when I pulled into the station, but seeing that I ran inside, they must have driven off. I still have no idea what the guy's intention was, but he followed me for easily an hour and a half, like 100 miles. It felt predatory as hell. Thankfully, I was able to gas up my car under the watchful eye of the gas station attendant, and the attendant told me the quickest way to the freeway. My trip was uneventful after that, but I was still shaking and thoroughly pissed at my boyfriend for not taking me seriously. Stay safe out there. Okay, so first of all, I'm a longtime lurker of this sub, and of Reddit in general. I first started browsing this particular sub around 2 years ago, and it's helped me a lot in terms of searching for warning signs and such. Today I created an account for the first time so I could share this story. Anyways, today I, 21 female, decided to visit my city's public library. I didn't have a specific plan in mind of what I wanted to do there initially, so I just did some browsing. However, once I moved on to the second floor of the building, I noticed that they had a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle set up on one of the tables, so I made a plan to spend my time putting the puzzle together for a bit, and then check out a book I saw earlier once I was ready to leave. The puzzle had already been put together in bits and pieces by others, but it was nowhere near finished. I spent maybe 20 minutes or so working on it when this old guy came up and started talking to me. It was very hard for me to understand him, but he said he wanted to sit down and watch me do the puzzle, so I let him. The man seemed friendly enough. We exchanged names, although I gave him a fake name just because I'm a very cautious person, and he then started asking me about what kind of movies and music I like, etc. He also asked me what my high school major was, or just what I like to do in school. It's at this point that I feel like I should mention that I both look and sound much younger than I really am. I'm currently in my 3rd year of college, but many people mistake me for a teenager at first. As I continued working on the puzzle and talking to this guy, I felt more freaked out by the minute. I'm not sure if it was just a gut feeling or whatever, but something just seemed off about him. Between how old he was, he mentioned being retired at one point, and the way I could barely understand him, I just didn't feel comfortable continuing conversation with him. I did my best to hide it, but he could definitely sense how I really felt, because he kept asking me if he was making me feel uncomfortable. Me, being the absolute doormat I am, told him that he wasn't. Finally, right around the time I was about to make up some excuse to get out of there, the man essentially asked me for my phone number. His exact wording was that he wanted to call me, but I don't think it makes much of a difference. I apologized and declined, saying that I don't really just give my number out to anyone. He seemed extremely disappointed, and, without another word, he got up and walked away. I took this as my chance to go downstairs, grab the book I wanted, and get on the bus home. As I was waiting for my bus to arrive, I thought I saw the strange guy again, so I pretended to be waiting at another stop instead, just in case he tried to follow me or something. I don't know if it was actually him, but if it was, he did not attempt to talk to me again. He just walked right by me, and I got on the right bus to go home once I couldn't see him anymore. So, what do you all think? Did I unintentionally hurt some old guy's feelings? Or did he have other intentions by trying to get my number? I honestly feel like I dodged a bullet, considering I look like a minor and never told the man my age. But I'd love to hear some feedback.